Hey everyone, this is Sean Deveney from Heavy.com Sports. I'm here with our NBA insider, Steve Bulpett. We're going to talk a little NBA here. A lot of stuff going on in the first round with injuries, with some upsets, with some surprises, with some guys coming back and looking to be in top form. Some things that stand out. Certainly, the Celtics Nets series has been a very good one. The first two games, the Celtics have won both, but both games were very, very interesting, very fun to watch. I think where I'd like to start with them is Kevin Durant, who hasn't played that well. I mean, 13 for 41 through the first two games. There's been some talk that he's showing signs of fatigue. Now, he played 37.2 minutes per game this season, which is the most he's played since he was 25 years old. He's now 33. He did only play 55 games because he had the number of injuries that he had, but no question he had to carry a very, very high load going back to November, December. And there's a chance maybe that's catching up with him. Do you buy that, or is this more of a Celtics defense thing?
I think if Kevin Durant is tired, it's that he's tired of getting beat up. I think it's the Celtic defense. I don't think he's fatigued because of the season so much. The Celtics are playing physical on him from the jump. And I'm kind of stunned that the Nets are just essentially getting him the ball up top and telling him to go to work. Because in that spot there, he's kind of open to all manner of schemes the Celtics want to throw at him. I fully expected in game two that they'd be running him off picks and getting him the ball more in a position to finish than having to, dribble his way from where he is to where he needs to be to get his shot off. So I'm a little surprised at that. And, obviously the Nets would like to come out with some more transition game that would get him into open spaces. But right now when the Nets are half court, he's having to slug through the mud against Boston's defense.
Yeah, and according to NBA.com stats, there's been 8 different Celtics that have taken a shot at guarding. Primarily, it's been Jason Tatum and Al Horford, but certainly we've seen everybody, Marcus Smart, even Peyton Pritchard, Grant Williams, no surprise there. He's done a very good job when he's matched up on him. So the Celtics are basically, to me, it looks like they're trying to send everything they can at Kevin Durant, give him a bunch of different looks, and everybody else, whether it's, even if it's Kyrie, obviously we saw in Kyrie in game one what Kyrie did. Didn't have the same game in game two, but a lot of other guys, Bruce Brown, Seth Curry stepped up, and it's almost like the Celtics are saying, we'll live with that, but we're going to do everything we can to take Kevin Durant out. Is that something where you think Ime Udoka is winning this coaching matchup at this point?
I don't know. I mean, when you're on the floor, the players have got to do the movement. I'm sure that Steve Nash isn't saying, okay, guys, when we have the ball, stand around and let's let them crowd us. I don't think that's the case at all. You saw at the start of game two, Bruce Brown getting a bunch of looks because the Nets were playing quick. They were making their moves and the floor was opening up, and not just for what buckets they could get, but, second chance opportunities, all that stuff. So, I don't think it's anything necessarily. I think the Nets can help themselves more than they are. Let's put it that way. And in the first game, when Kyrie got off, the floor was spaced pretty well for him, and he was able to make moves. And it just seems like the Celtics are doing a lot better job of showing bodies in the way. And I think there's become some frustration for both Durant and Kyrie Irving that, that their moves aren't as easy. It kind of goes back to some of the problems that Boston's had in the past, where the guys are saying, well, I'll take responsibility. I'll go make a move here. And that kind of takes you away from the team offense you need to have, even if it's only to get yourself a better look.
Yeah, and the Celtics were content in game two. Maybe they didn't like the number of free throws that Kevin Durant shot and getting 20 of them, and he made 18. He's such a good free throw shooter. But they seem to be okay with keeping up the physicality on him, even if it means sending him to the line. That gives them a better chance than getting him into a lot of movement, like you say, getting him going downhill the way that he's capable of. That they were fine with being physical with him.
Yeah, it's like the old, let's go back to the Pistons or the Pistons in the 80s or the Knicks in the 90s. They can't call every foul. So the more you commit, the better percentage you have that won't get called. And it just sets a tone for how the game gets called. Referees, I think that the nature of a ref is that the more assertive team, the more aggressive team gets the benefit of the calls. If you're on your heels and you're reaching, that's where the foul, that's where the whistles come. But if you're playing aggressively, yeah, they're going to call some fouls, but you've set the tone for how the game will be played, and accordingly how the game will be called.
We've got a sense now of Ben Simmons and when he'll make his first appearance of the season. The Nets could very well be with their backs against the wall when that happens in Game 4. But let's talk about Robert Williams. And with the Celtics up 2-0, there's been a lot of talk about him, really pushing to get ahead of that 4 to 6 week timeline, ahead of the 4 part of that timeline, and return early. With the Celtics up 2-0, 2 games in Brooklyn, certainly if they could win one, does that change the calculus, or do you think the Celtics are looking at Robert Williams as we're going to get him back on the floor as soon as he's ready? Or does the fact that hey, look, maybe if we're up 3-0, if we're up 3-1, maybe we don't rush him back, maybe we give him a few more days. Is that something that'll factor into this?
Yeah, I kind of thought it was going to be a situation where if they win Game 3, you kind of just wait, and see what happens as the rest of the series goes, and hope that you just don't need him until round 2. But I'm getting the sense now from talking to a couple of people that if he's able to play a little bit in Game 3, that they'll throw him out there a bit. It's not like it's going to upset the apple cart. He's a guy that if they can get him on the floor and just get him as part of their rotating defense, an extra large body to close out to a shooter, to make the Bruce Brown's sideline 3 a little more difficult. I think that very well might happen. Again, you'd be throwing him in for a few minutes. You wouldn't be saying, okay, we need you to play heavy in Game 3 here. So I wouldn't be stunned if you saw a little bit of Rob Williams in Game 3. But it's all going to be dictated by really how physically ready he is. And if that's something we don't know, and if the medical people say, hey, he's fine, then I think you could see him some.
Yeah, he certainly seems eager to play, and they seem eager to get him back out there. And they've got to think maybe beyond round 1. I mean, I don't think you can go into a playoff thinking, all right, what happens if we are in the Eastern Conference Finals? Obviously, you can't do that, but you've got to think, how is this going to affect where we want to go? And when they bring Robert Williams back, and how fit he is, not only physically, but just getting back into the flow of the game, they're going to need him as quickly as possible, no matter what happens here.
Yeah, and as much as you want to be, to err on the side of caution, it would be a little bit difficult if his first appearance in the playoffs is a Game 1 against Milwaukee.
Yeah,
and we're putting the cart before the horse here. This series, the Nets could very well come in and take Games 3 and 4, and you could be in for a war here as the rest of this goes. But if you're looking at Boston's best hope, then yeah, and they get by this series relatively quickly in 4 or 5. And yeah, it'd be kind of difficult if, again, his first appearance would be in a Game 1 against Milwaukee. You'd want to have him, prepared for that a little bit more than just tossing him in that kind of a situation, I would think.
Yeah, and one more thing on this series, with the injury to Chris Middleton, we don't know exactly how long he'll be out, but could be a while, and possibly could be for most of, if not all of, the second round of the playoffs. You know, I can't help but look at whoever wins this series, whether it's Brooklyn or the Celtics, as they, to me, leap to the top of the Eastern Conference in terms of what I expect and what I think they can accomplish. That's not take nothing away from Miami, Philadelphia. It's just these two teams have been, have to me the best shot. Especially if you can get past Milwaukee. We've seen from Milwaukee, especially last year, what Middleton does in the playoffs and how important a closer he is for them. Not having him on the court now, I thought all along that Milwaukee was the chalk in the East. If you've got a Celtics or a Nets team going up against a Middleton-less Milwaukee, now I think whoever wins this series really has a decent path to the NBA Finals.
It would seem that way, but you don't know how the team dynamic will change. If Middleton's out, does Holiday step up and take more of the role? And he's a guy who's certainly capable. The problem with losing Middleton, the biggest problem is your floor spacing is altered dramatically, and whereas Giannis will drive through anything. It still makes his life a lot easier when you've got the shooters out there. And I don't think Milwaukee's out of it by any means. If Middleton misses some time, and I have a hard time looking past Miami as well. When you get we're used to seeing the mood swings in the NBA during the season. Teams, can ride a roller coaster based on how their 3-point shooting is going. Well, that's even more magnified, obviously, in the postseason. But if Miami gets hot from the outside, if Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero get hot, then I'm not looking past them at all. So, I have a hard time making definitive statements, but what you said is certainly true. You would have to think that if Chris Middleton is out for a while, that whoever comes out of Boston, Brooklyn, has certainly has a leg up in the next round.
Again, I'm Sean Deveney with Heavy.com Sports, and this is Steve Bulpett, our NBA insider. You mentioned Miami. Tyler Hero had some comments this week that were interesting, where he talked about last year, where he had this perception that he was more interested in being a fashion plate and his status with the ladies, as he put it, that was something that people in Miami saw as distracting him from basketball. That's certainly something I'd heard as well, that there were people that weren't very happy with that. No question, I think you can at least say that the Heat wanted Tyler to be more dedicated to making himself physically ready for an entire season. He's such a skinny guy, and he certainly did that. He bulked up. So, you can say whatever the reasons that he didn't seem to be as dedicated to the game as they wanted him to, whatever those reasons were, there's no question that his reaction was to put in more work this summer. He was with USA Basketball on that select team. He put in a lot more work on his body. That was clear from training camp. So I just wonder, where you see Tyler Hero, those comments, and sort of the status of his game. Averaged 20 points, 45% shooting, 40% 3-point shooting, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, good across the board numbers. Where did you see his development, and especially compared to last year, where it just didn't seem to be there?
Yeah, I think with every shooter, and particularly with a guy like Hero, it's a confidence game. And a couple of years ago, his confidence was off the charts.
Right.
I mean, he was shouting at opponents, "Hey, I'm a bucket." Cocky is all hell. But confidence has to come from work. You can't fool yourself on that. As with any shooter, you could have ups and downs. You could have times where you go into lulls. Ray Allen during the finals a bunch of years ago, goes through a lull for the Celtics. It happens, and it could happen with a Tyler Hero. But I think the point you're making is the fact that he's put in more work will make his confidence be based on something real. That's the kind of guy that, if you're playing Miami, you've got to make sure he's identified in every possession. You're not going to double him and throw bodies at him the way that that Kevin Durant is having happen to him now. But you've got to be able to, identify him and not be out of his zip code.
I don't envy any general manager has to make these kinds of decisions on a guy like a Tyler Hero, where you've got to look at 3 years and you've seen growth. A guy like RJ Barrett's in the same situation. You've seen growth, and the guy has gotten to where he's averaging 20 points, but everything else is a little above average, nothing great, but certainly there's potential for more growth there. And you've got to make a decision on a contract extension 3 years in. You don't have to make that decision. There's restricted free agency. You can wait. We all know how that goes. DeAndre Ayton went through that last summer, where the team said, we're gonna hit you back in restricted free agency, which he wasn't happy about. But at the same time, that's the way the rules are set up. So it behooves a team sometimes to take advantage of that, right? I mean, that's why the rules are there. But teams don't like to do that. They feel like it does sort of sap the confidence and maybe sour the relationship with the player a little bit. That might be overblown, but that's certainly the tool that agents use against teams. So that's a long way to ask this question, but with Tyler Hero, where do you stand on him? Is he a max guy? There's going to be he's going to be looking for that kind of money. What does Miami do in that situation?
I don't think he's a max guy. A player's worth what he can get in the market. And do I see someone else giving him max? I don't. But I think you got to look at it like not just in the basketball sense of what he can do for you, but what he is as an asset. So the best way to present him as an asset is to lock him up, to get him under a contract, to say, hey, look, the whims of the market can change. Here's real money. Here's guaranteed money for the next X number of years. You're set. You put in incentives to make it even better for him if you want. But once you've got him under a contract like that, he becomes an asset. He becomes a tradable asset. Teams, because of the way Miami plays, it features guys like Tyler Hero. So there'll always be a market for him. He won't be, you've seen that most any contract can get traded, probably excepting Russell Westbrook right now. But, I do think that the smart way to do with him, and I fully expect this from the Heat, is to try to lock him up and play it that way. If he refuses that and tries to go toward restricted free agency, I think he's opening himself up to all manner of some difficult possibilities. Everyone says bet on yourself.
Yeah.
But no one ever what's the old line? No one ever went broke taking a profit.
Yeah. Right. He could get certainly Miami's going to offer him something I think most of us would say is fair. But if he holds out and he really wants that max deal, that's going to be tough for the Heat to go that high.
It's going to be an international telephone number.
Yeah. Right. All right. One last topic here, Steve. Certainly the Warriors have looked great here in the first round of the playoffs and their matchup with Denver, which is a team that played well all year, even though they're banged up, obviously missing Michael Porter Jr. And Jamal Murray. But they've played well, especially down the stretch. The Warriors have taken care of them in 3 games. Last game out, you had Steph Curry really finally show himself to be Steph Curry, and Jordan Poole still able to put in his points, and Klay Thompson looking like Klay Thompson. So, you got 80 points from those 3 guys. Would you say at this point the Warriors are back and these are legitimate contenders?
Yeah, I think it's what we always expected, right? That if they got themselves whole, that certainly there's enough offense there. And with Draymond Green anchoring your defense, they're going to be fine. The question is, are they susceptible to size? But if you play the way they play, that doesn't. Sometimes you don't get to use your size against them. The fact that they've got a lot of guys that can stay warm as shooters talks about their ball movements, and we've been discussing a lot, and with other clubs. But it's something that's so critical. A guy like Poole, if he's not getting touches, it's hard for him to stay, in rhythm when you've got Klay Thompson and Steph Curry back. But when the ball moves and you get your touches, even if you're not shooting at that, those for 3 or 4 or 5 possessions, you're still in rhythm. And the way that Golden State plays so unselfishly, you're going to be open to lulls because threes are going to fall and not fall. It's not as good a percentage shot as something in the lane, but they play that style as well or better than anybody. So yeah, the Warriors whole are certainly got to be taken as a huge threat in the West. And if Devin Booker's injury is lingering, then they may not even have the Suns to get through.
Yeah, and Booker's it's a great point about Booker. I talked to an assistant coach a little while ago before Booker's injury, and he said that, and I said, what's probably the biggest thing in the way for the Warriors? And it wasn't Booker, and it wasn't Chris Paul. It was more DeAndre Ayton, because of his size and the difficulty they'll have, guarding him. He becomes a lot easier to guard though if you don't have to worry about Devin Booker on the perimeter. If he's the guy you can focus on, you've got Chris Paul obviously, but then if the number 2 option is Ayton, that's a lot different than if you've got to worry about Devin Booker. So that should be that makes things a lot easier for the Warriors path. The one thing that I just want to get your read on from the first 3 games here is they've not defended Denver that well. This was the team with the number 2 defense in the NBA during the regular season. And when you think about that run that they had of going to the finals, as great as the 3-pointers were, it was their defense that consistently got them to the NBA finals. They need to play a certain level of defense. They haven't really done that against Denver. Is that more of a function of Jokic and the Nuggets, or is that something that maybe you kind of keep an eye on with this team?
I think what I've seen is when you're trying to focus on dealing with the Nikola Jokic, that it kind of takes you away from some of the other stuff you want to do, or just it puts you in positions you're not necessarily used to. But hey, there's times where you just got to slug it out and deal with what you got in front of you. When you talk about the Warriors having the number 2 defense, that's against everybody, right? But right. Now you're like up against, if they played the Denver Nuggets 82 games, that was their season, they probably wouldn't have the number 2 defense.
Right.
Right. The guy can be baseball can be a 300 hitter, but when you're facing Max Scherzer, if you play him every single night, you're probably not a 300 hitter.
Right.
The averages change when you're having to focus on just one opponent.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to find something to pick on the Warriors for here, and there just hasn't been. They've been really, really good here in these 3 games.
Well, maybe perhaps the fact that they're focusing on getting their offense on track, which they seem to have done quite nicely, has affected their defense. Yeah. Maybe there's not been the focus there necessarily in an overall sense. But, and look, teams go through lulls even in games. The game 3 was, the Nuggets had their opportunities, certainly, and that could have altered the course of the series. So, in each series we've seen pretty much, there have been stretches of a game, maybe a 5-minute stretch, that's really kind of altered the course of a series. Pick a series.
Yeah.
If the Timberwolves hold it together for a few more minutes last night, do the Grizzlies go away? And that would clearly change the look of that series, right?
Yeah.
So we try to make the grander points out of the things, but it can come down to something really minute that alters a course.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Steve. Appreciate talking some NBA basketball here, and thank you all for checking it out. And remember to go to heavy.com for more on the NBA. Thanks.